The year is 1885. A local man named Aidan Arrowsmith arranged two key meetings between two church teams, Bury Wesleyans and Bury Unitarians, at the Wagon and Horses Hotel. An agreement was made to form a professional football club named Bury Football Club. Ahead of the 1885-86 season, the club leased a plot of land on Gig Lane from the Earl of Derby's estate. And on the 12th of September 1885, Bury FC would play their first ever football match at their stadium, a 4-3 win over Wigan. Only 15 years later, in 1900, Bury would beat Southampton 4-0 in the FA Cup final. Bury were drawn to play away from home in every single round leading up to the final, which really shows how great of a team they were. Each player also received a £10 bonus for winning the cup final, which translates to around £1,600 now. 3 years later, Bury would be crowned champions for the second time, beating Derby 6-0 in the final. A deadly attack paired with a rock-solid defence which didn't concede a single goal in the whole tournament solidified the team's stature as one of the best in the country. 63,000 people attended to watch the hammering at the old Crystal Palace Stadium. The result still holds the record to this day for the largest FA Cup final margin, tied with Manchester City's 6-0 smashing of Watford in 2019. The ball used in this final is actually held on display at the National Football Museum. However, Bury FC were folded in 2019 due to financial issues after an extremely turbulent 100 years. So how exactly did Bury FC go from being a two-time FA Cup champion to no longer existing? In 1926, Bury would finish 4th in the First Division, their highest finish to date. However, they were relegated 3 years later in 1929 and would never play a top-flight game again. Football would be put on hold around the country and the world during World War II. However, Bury would stay relatively active, relying mostly on guest players because of service calls. On New Year's Eve of 1939, Bury would come out triumphant in a 7-6 thriller friendly against Stoke. Bury would also be placed in one of the 10 regional leagues in 1940, which they won. Bury would be crowned champions of the North West League. North West League champions, you'll never sing that. After the war ended, Bury would float around the 2nd and 3rd divisions, and in 1971, Bury would be relegated to the 4th tier of English football for their first time in their history. The club would be promoted back to the 3rd tier in its centenary anniversary in 1985. The next few years would be turbulent for the club. They'd lose in the playoff semis 2 years running in 1990 and 91, before getting relegated to Division 4 in 1992. Bury would yet again lose in the playoff semis in their first season back in the 4th tier. 3 years later, they'd return to the playoffs for a shot at redemption. This time, they'd break the semi-final curse, beating Preston North End, only to lose 2-0 to Chesterfield in the final. However, they wouldn't let their heads drop. In 1995, in came Stan Turner, who led the Shakers to 2 successive promotions, finishing 3rd in Division 4 in 1996 before winning the Division 3 title in 1997, putting Bury in the 2nd tier of English football for their first time in 30 years. However, their Division 2 journey wouldn't last long, as they were tragically relegated on the last day of the 1998-99 season based on goals scored. Bury actually had a higher goal difference than its points partner Port Vale, but the goal scored metric was used instead. The league weirdly reinstated the goal difference metric to be used as a tiebreaker the following year. The decade of the 2000s would prove to be one of the worst, as in 2002, the collapse of ITV Digital brought the club into administration and on the brink of extinction. A supporters campaign managed to raise money for the survival of the club. UEFA appreciated this act and handed the club the Best Supporter Award for 2001-02. This wouldn't prevent the club from relegation to Division 4, however, as they'd be demoted the following year. They reached the playoffs in their first season back down, but lost in the semi-finals again to Bournemouth. In May 2005, Bury became the first and still first football club to score 1,000 goals in each of the top 4 tiers in English football. A year later, in December of 2006, the Shakers would be expelled from the FA Cup as they were exposed for fielding an ineligible player in the 2nd round. They'd end the season in their lowest ever position at 21st, avoiding relegation from the Football League by the skin of their teeth. In 2008, Burnley appointed former player Alan Neil, who led them to 4th place where they lost in the semi-finals of the playoffs on penalties against Shrewsbury Town, of course. However, they finished 2nd in 2011 and finally returned to League 1. In 2012, cracks would start to open and the true story of what was going on behind the scenes at the club would begin to be uncovered. They were placed under a transfer embargo after suffering financial problems due to low attendance. They were also relegated at the end of the season. This led to property investor Stuart Day becoming chairman of the club in 2013. Later that year, he noted that £1.5 million had been invested into the club, mostly to pay off debts. Bury finished the 2014-15 season with a club record high of 85 points, finishing third in League 2, gaining automatic promotion. They'd spend the next 3 seasons in League 1 before yet another relegation down to the 4th tier in 2018. They'd win promotion to League 1 yet again the following season after a 1-1 draw at Tranmere Rovers. However, this would be their final promotion. Businessman Steve Dale bought the club from Stuart Day for £1 in December 2018. He was forced to pay an outstanding tax bill to avoid a HM Revenue and Customs winding up order, liquidation, in February of 2019. Nevertheless, financial problems would resurface in April after staff and players did not receive their salaries on time. This caused controversy between the EFL, also sparking doubt whether Bury's next game against Colchester would go ahead or not. On the 25th of April, owner Steve Dale said the financial issues were far in excess to what he understood when he took over and put the club up for sale on the open market. £1.6 million was owed in wages, HMRC and pensions to the end of May. However, only £180,000 of income was expected for that period. On the 19th of June, a High Court hearing on the liquidation petition was delayed until the 31st of July, allowing the club to be sold. To secure the safety of the club's future, Dale proposed a CVA, Company Voluntary Arrangement, which pretty much means he promised to pay the debt off over time. This means that the court dismissed the liquidation petition on the 31st of July. However, due to EFL rules, the club was handed a 12-point deduction ahead of the 2019-20 season. This, accompanied by the loss of manager Ryan Lowe and many first-team players, meant that the club had very low chances of survival. On the 25th of July, the EFL requested proof that the promises Dale made would be kept. The proof was obviously never given. This resulted in the club's opening game of the season against MK Dons being suspended, as were 4 other league games. They were also expelled from the League Cup. It was all crashing down, and there was one man in the centre of this: Steve Dale. On the 8th of August, Bury were given yet another extension to pay the debts. 4 days later, on the 12th, Dale said he would consider selling the club after staff and fans urged him to accept an offer to buy the club. But on August 20th, the deal fell through. Steve Dale rejected a deal that would have secured the safety of the club. Why? For his own benefit. You see, Steve Dale was never a football fan.
You're not a sports fan, you kind of freely admitted that.
But what they need to do is temper it and not be silly and not show themselves up by disgraceful behaviour when they're full of beer. I didn't even know there was a football team called Bury, to be honest with you. I'm not a football fan.
He did not care about the club nor the fans. He just wanted to fill his pockets. Bury North MP James Frith wrote to the EFL chair asking for the deadline to be extended again, which was supported by the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham. On the 22nd of August, the EFL gave the club a final 48 hours. It was now or never. News emerged that 4 separate parties were interested in buying the club. Late on the 23rd of August, with less than 24 hours left of the deadline, Dale was reportedly said to have agreed a deal with analytics company CNN Sporting Risk. The following morning, the EFL gave the club until 5 to complete the sale. Shortly before the deadline, CNN Sporting Risk pulled out, saying it was unable to proceed. Around 11 PM on the 27th of August 2019, the EFL announced that Bury were officially expelled from the Football League.
Nothing you do, you know. I got engaged over there to my fiancée. It is.
It's not family, it's business, it's just money. That's all they want.
The venues that we have in Bury, like pubs and chippies and whatnot, they're making money. The community of Bury is making money just by us playing here.
The day had begun hopefully. Hundreds of volunteers preparing the stadium for what they thought would be Bury's first home game of the season on Saturday. Owner Stephen Dale had bought the club for £1 and he'd been set to sell it to CNN Sporting Risk. But with just hours until the EFL deadline, the deal collapsed.
Bury became the first club since Maidstone in 1992 to be expelled from the Football League. After the expulsion, it was revealed that a Brazilian-backed potential buyer had been rejected by Dale. Debate sparked whether the club should be reinstated into League 2 for the 2020-21 season. However, the EFL eventually decided against it, stating that a lack of owner funding caused the demise of the club. However, what if I told you Bury FC aren't quite dead yet? When the High Court reconvened, the liquidation petition was dismissed. HMRC said an unspecified debt had been paid, as was a further liquidation petition on 5th of February 2020. So despite not having a league to play in, Bury still exists. In 2019, a group of fans formed Phoenix Club Bury AFC. A Phoenix Club is when a team is created to replace a club that has failed in business terms. Bury AFC began playing football again in 2020-21 in the North West Countries Football League, the 10th tier of English football, which they'd win in 2022. In mid-2020, Dale came back. He began making statements on the club website stating that the Phoenix Club Bury AFC was fake. On the 27th of November 2020, Dale placed the club into administration, and in May 2021 it was confirmed that the club's total liability amounted to over £12 million. In November 2021, the court extended the period of administration of Bury FC until May of this year. Bury AFC also requested to rent Gig Lane, Bury FC Stadium, but the request was unfortunately rejected. Steve Dale was also declared bankrupt in October of 2022. In March of this year, a poll regarding a merge between Bury AFC and Bury FC was put forward. The outcome of the vote is set to be announced on the 5th of May, which is 4 days away from writing. So by the time this video goes out, Bury may well be a step closer to revival.